Presentation for 2019. I'm Barbara Cook, co-chair with Amy Towery of the Book Sandwiched In series, and I don't know if I saw Amy today. I guess not. As always, there are refreshments, at least a few left over there on the table, as well as your coffee and tea. And Brad is at the back of the room manning the membership table in case you haven't gotten memberships as in the Friends of the Library. Today, our presenter is Bill Boland. A native of Corning, Bill returned here 10 years ago after a business career in management, sales, information systems, communications, and advocacy. In Corning, Bill has pursued interests in art and public service, including councilman, deputy mayor, and currently mayor of the city. He is also an active volunteer with the Corning Rotary Club and Meals on Wheels. Our book today is The President is Missing, written by James Patterson and Bill Clinton. You'll remember that last year, Bill was unable to give his review of Al Franken's Giant of the Senate due to weather conditions, and today was a little shaky. But we now will give a very special welcome to Bill and his presentation since he was able to come today.
Thank you very much. I just first of all want to say what a pleasure it is for me to be here, and I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to do this. As you mentioned, it was a close call. I was coming back from Albany yesterday, and it was an harrowing experience coming over the highway. But did make it last year, did make it this year. Al Franken will pardon me for not reviewing his book. But again, I would like to say that this is my first book review. So I did a couple book reports, but so I hope you'll be charitable in reviewing my review. From the book. One of the great ironies of the modern age is that advancements of mankind can make us more powerful and yet more vulnerable at the same time. The greater the power, the greater the vulnerability. You think rightly so that you are at the apex of your power, that you can do more things than ever before, but I see you at the peak of your vulnerability. The reason is reliance. Our society has become completely reliant on technology, the Internet of Things. And not just laptop computers and smartphones, anything with a power switch, washing machines, coffee makers, DVRs, digital cameras, thermostats, machine components, jet engines. The list of things large and small is almost endless. 2 years ago, there were 15 billion devices connected to the Internet. 2 years from now, I've read estimates that the number will be 50 billion. I've heard 100 billion. The layperson can hardly turn on a television anymore without seeing a commercial about the latest smart device and how it will do something you never would have thought possible 20 years ago. And all that connectivity makes us more vulnerable to malware and spyware. Nearly every sophisticated form of automation, nearly every transaction in the modern world relies on the Internet. The President is Missing is a story about an imminent cyber attack threat against the United States and the young president who must stop it. It's about a terrorist cell that has, quote, infected every internet service provider in the country. And those providers have, in turn, passed the virus to every node, every device that uses the internet in the United States. The aim is to steal the internet from the United States of America. From the book, let me give you a further sense of that threat. 50 years ago, you had typewriters and carbon paper. Now you only have computers. 50 years ago, in most cases 10 or 15 years ago, You didn't rely on connectivity to run so many of your operations, but now you do. It's the only way you operate. Take it away, and there is no fallback. The examples are limitless. Small examples: elevators stopped working, grocery store scanners, train and bus passes, televisions, phones, radios, traffic lights, credit card scanners, home alarm system. Laptop computers will lose all of their software, all files, everything erased. Your computer will be nothing but a keyboard and a blank screen. Electricity would be severely compromised, which means refrigerators, in some cases heat and water. That means health problems on a massive scale. Who will care for the sick? Hospitals? Will they have the necessary resources to treat you? Surgical operations these days are highly computerized, and they will not have access to any of your prior medical records online. For that matter, will they treat you at all? Do you have health insurance? Says who? A card in your pocket? Well, they won't be able to look you up and confirm it. Nor will they be able to seek reimbursement from the insurer. And even if they could get in contact with the insurance company won't know whether you are its customer. Does it have handwritten lists of its policyholders? Of course not. It's all on computers that have been erased. Will the hospitals work for free? No websites, of course. No e-commerce. Conveyor belts, sophisticated machinery inside manufacturing plants, payroll records. Planes will be grounded. Even trains may not operate in most places. Cars, at least any built since 2010 or so, will be affected. Legal records, welfare records, law enforcement databases, the ability of local police to identify criminals, to coordinate with other states and federal governments through databases, no more. Bank records. You think you have $10,000 in your savings account, $50,000 in a retirement account. Do you think you have a pension that allows you to receive a fixed payment every month? Not if computer files and their backups are erased. Do banks have a large wad of cash wrapped in rubber band with your name on it, sitting in a vault somewhere? Of course not. It's all data. The financial markets. There are no longer trading floors. It is all electronic. All trading through American exchanges will stop. Government functions, of course. The government depends on collection of revenue, the tax rules for income tax, the collection of sales tax, excise taxes, and the like. All of it gone. Where will the government get the money to function? To the extent it can function. The flow of currency will be suddenly reduced to hand-to-hand transactions in cash. And cash from where? You will not be able to go to your local bank or to your nearest ATM and withdraw cash because the bank has no record of you. The economy in this country will screech to a halt. Entire industrial sectors dependent exclusively on the internet will have no means of surviving. The others will be severely compromised, and the impact will inevitably lead to massive unemployment, an enormous reduction in the availability of credit, a recession the likes of which would make your depression in the 1930s look like a momentary hiccup. Panic, he says, widespread panic, a run on the banks, looting of grocery stores, rioting, massive crime, the outbreak of disease, all semblance of civil order, gone. The United States will be vulnerable to attack in ways it never has been before. Our military defenses will be in 19th century levels against enemies with 21st century capabilities, like Russia and China and North Korea. The President is Missing is a work of fiction by the popular author James Patterson and former President Bill Clinton. and it takes place over a 3-day period, over a weekend, and is told in the present tense from the viewpoint of President Jonathan Lincoln Duncan, a highly decorated veteran of Operation Desert Storm in Iraq, where he was captured and tortured. He recently lost his wife to cancer and has a young daughter living in Paris. He has rugged good looks and a sharp sense of humor and a temper. He strives for a safer, stronger, fairer, and kinder country. The opening chapter finds President Duncan participating in a mock hearing with his staff in preparation for a real hearing before a House Select Committee scheduled for the next Monday, in which he will be grilled about a call he made to the, quote, most dangerous and prolific cyber terrorist in the world, Suleiman Sindarak, who leads an organization known as Sons of Jihad. Also part of the investigation is a report that President Duncan ordered the thwarting of an Israeli attempt to kill Suleiman. It's clear in his mock hearings responses, feisty and combative, that the President has no intention of sharing his reasons for his actions with the Congressional Committee, even if it leads down a path to impeachment, as he battles his political rival, Lester Rhodes, the Speaker of the House of Representatives. In the midst of this turmoil, the President is preparing actions in case the threat is realized. A draft executive order declaring martial law, draft legislation for Congress, a draft executive order suspending habeas corpus, and an executive order instituting price controls and rationing various consumer goods. Early on, we are introduced to Carolyn Brock, Chief of Staff, who in addition to handling scheduling and personnel issues, is also the President's go-to person for members of Congress, the Cabinet, interest groups, and the press. She is described as intelligent, personable, telegenic, loyal, and fierce, what the book describes as a 5-tooled player. A former Congresswoman, who many predicted would rise to become Speaker of the House, and was seriously considered as a possible vice presidential candidate, that is, until an audio of her in a restaurant came to light in which she refers to an opponent with a sexually charged word, which I won't repeat today. Her response when it came to light, if a man said it, it wouldn't be an issue. I guess we hear that pretty often. But it was, and she lost the election. She became Jonathan Duncan's campaign manager and later his chief of staff. The story advances on as President meets with a young girl, Nina, in the Oval Office, who purports to have a solution to the looming crisis, but only as a pair with her partner in crime, Augie. She gains access to the President through his daughter in Paris by sharing with her a code name for the impending crisis, Dark Ages. The President considers and grants her a meeting and takes her seriously because that code name was shared by the President with only 6 people, including the Vice President, the Secretary of State, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Director of the CIA, the Secretary of Homeland Security, the Attorney General, and the President's Chief of Staff. Of course, this means that there was a traitor in this group. In her Oval Office meeting, the young woman says she will not tell the President how to stop the threat unless she meets with her partner, Augie, because she knows only part of the secret to end the threat, and Augie knows the other part. She insists that it be outside the White House, and the President agrees. And he sets out on a plan to exit the White House undetected and without Secret Service detail to rendezvous with Augie. Thus, the President is missing. The rendezvous takes place at the Washington Nationals baseball stadium, high in the left field seats. One of the more compelling characters is a female assassin known as Bach. She is introduced to us emerging from a gate at Reagan National Airport, dressed in disguise, earbuds in, listening to Bach's whimsical first movement of Violin Concerto No. 1. Look happy, she tells herself, as that is the emotion least likely to arouse suspicion. We learn this will be her last mission, relying on her black or matte black semi-automatic rifle, capable of firing 5 rounds in less than 2 seconds. A weapon she calls Anna Magdalena. We learn that she is killed on every continent, assassinating generals, activists, politicians, and businessmen. In the world of for-hire killers, she is known only by her gender, the classical music composer she favors, and most importantly, her 100% kill rate. She reflects on this mission will be her last, greatest challenge, and her greatest success. As the rendezvous with Augie confirms that the threat comes from the terrorist Suleiman Sindarak, Augie says, my interests are no longer aligned with Suleiman. But before telling the president what he wants, Augie insists that they go now. And they do. But as they exit the stadium, as the van waits, the lights in the area go out and everything is black. They race towards the van to see Nina in the driver's seat. As they reach the van, the driver's side window shatters and the left side of Nina's face explodes, with blood and tissue and brain matter spattered on the windshield. Dead at the hands of the assassin, Bach, and her accomplices. Augie and the president are rescued by the Secret Service, who disobeyed the president's order not to be followed. The president orders that they not go back to the White House, but as they cross the Potomac, their SUVs are ambushed. The president and Augie escape in one of the SUVs and drive to the, quote, Blue House. That's Carolyn Brock's house, and her husband is waiting and expecting them. The president retreats to a secure office in the basement and begins to communicate with his staff and the world leaders to gain control of the situation. Learning Augie's nationality as Ukrainian and confirming him as a member of Sons of Jihad, the president interrogates him to learn that Nina created Dark Ages, and Augie was in charge of infiltrating the computer servers throughout the United States. He learns that Suleiman knows that Nina and Augie had broken away from him and were likely helping the Americans thwart the virus. He learns that Dark Ages virus will detonate on Saturday. Learning Augie's weaved into the story is the suspicion that Vice President Katharine Grant might be a traitor. She was President Duncan's chief rival for the nomination for president and was clearly bitter to be in the second in line. As the president locks down the White House, she is ordered to be sequestered in a secure bunker, and she is kept in the dark as to the president's status. She refuses to be retained and goes on to an apparent conspiracy with the Speaker of the House, Lester Rhodes. The story continues as the president switches locations to a secure cabin in the woods, fully outfitted for modern communication and computer processing. There they learn of an attack in Los Angeles against a laboratory on the front line of response to biological and chemical attacks. This tracks into a breach of a main water supply plant tainting the water supplying Los Angeles. They caught the cyber intrusion before any water was tainted, but the plant was closed for business. Continuing the storyline with Augie, the president learns that Nina was considered a terrorist in her native Georgia, that Nina and Augie were in love, and that their motivation for helping the Americans was to gain their help to return them to Georgia. It begins to unfold that the Russians were suspected of being everything backing Sullivan. The story continues on as the president enlists the help of key allies, Israel and Germany, the leaders of which join him at the cabin retreat. The president assembles a crack team of computer programmers to discover and disable the virus, and thwarting an attack on a compound by Bach and her henchmen. In the end, after a countdown that brings doomsday a second away from happening, the threat is, well, you'll either have to read the book or see me after. I think I've given you enough. And that's the same for the traitor. So if you want to know that, you'll see me. Embedded in the book is plenty of commentary on contemporary political life and its surroundings. As an example, participation in our democracy seems to be driven by the instant gratification worlds of Twitter, Snapchat, Facebook, and the 24-hour news cycle. We're using modern technology to revert to primitive kinds of human relations. The media knows what sells: conflict and division. It's also quick and easy. All too often, anger works better than answers, resentment better than reason, emotion trumps evidence. A sanctimonious, sneering one-liner, no matter how bogus, is seen as straight talk, while a calm, well-argued response is seen as canned and phony. It reminds me of the old political joke: why do you take such an instant dislike to people? It saves a lot of time. What happened to factual, down-the-middle reporting? That's hard to even define anymore, as the line between fact and fiction, between truth and lies, gets murkier every day. We can't survive without a free press dedicated to preserving that fine line and secure enough to follow the facts where they lead. But the current environment imposes serious pressures on our journalists, at least those who cover politics, to do just the reverse, to exercise their own power, and to, in the words of one wise columnist, abnormalize all politicians, even honest, able ones, often because of relatively insignificant issues. There's lots of women in high places in this book: Vice President, Chief of Staff, Secretary of State, and CIA Director. And I just had to wonder if Hillary might have been whispering in Bill's ear. In its finer moments, the book reflects directly on the challenges of our time. It's a battle as old as humanity, us versus them. In every age and time, individuals, families, clans, and nations had struggled with how to treat the other. In America, racism is our oldest curse. But there are other divides over religion, immigration, sexual identity. Sometimes the them strategy is just a narcotic to feed the beast in all of us. All too often, those who rail against, quote, them prevail over earnest pleas to remember what we can be and do together. Our brains have worked this way for a long time. Maybe they always will. But we have to keep trying. That's the permanent mission our founding fathers left to us, moving towards the more perfect union. As you might expect with President Clinton as a co-author, the book is rich with inside details of life in the president's world. For example, several descriptions of international incidents that are hashed out among military and civilian leaders in the Situation Room. Very interesting stuff. It's not hard to see the parallels between President William Jefferson Clinton and President Jonathan Lincoln Duncan. Both former governors of southern states, both met their spouses in law school, both with young daughters they adored and in school, and both hounded by their political enemies. The chapters are brief, 129 in all, and that makes a long story fly by. Other critics have called it, quote, an overheated, logic-defying, overlong thriller about cyber terrorism that thrives on breathless homeland-style pyrotechnics, brought to an occasional screeching halt by policy-wonk digressions. Another says a diverting enough beach read. And lastly, it is a standard issue product, similar in plot and tone to 1,000 other suspense stories in print and film. For myself, I relate most closely to the last description. I found the book lacking in thrill and just plain lackluster in many sections. But as a policy wonk fan myself, I did enjoy what were obvious takes penned by President Clinton. And I want to thank you once again for the opportunity to be here today, and I look forward to some additional discussion. Thank you. Go ahead, Ted.
Have the movie rights been acquired, do you know?
I believe they have, yes. I don't know. I suspect it'll be a much better movie than it was a book. That would be my thought. John?
Margaret and I both enjoyed the book, kind of a page turner for us.
Okay.
But I've read books by Patterson, and knowing Bill Clinton, and certain chapters absolutely had to be Bill Clinton, because you had to be the president to know some of the things he knew.
Yeah.
Did you notice that too? Did you kind of start ascribing certain chapters to Bill Clinton, certain chapters to Patterson?
Absolutely. Anytime the policy wonk stuff started to come out, you could hear Clinton. And there's I won't spoil alert anymore, but there's something at the end of the book which is many pages long, which is kind of Clinton style. His autobiography was, I don't know, 800 pages or something like that. But you could readily identify that. So, and that was interesting, because a lot of this commentary on our political life seemed interesting to me. So I don't want to paint a completely negative picture of the book. And like I said, for me, those parts of the book were very interesting. Right.
You seem to suggest you enjoyed it and that it was informative. Is that true?
I think it inspired reflection on some of these passages that I read. I don't think there was anything in the book that was particularly informative, other than some of the details of the life of a president and some of the restrictions. There's sections on the Secret Service and limitations that this storyline placed on them and their role in rescuing and saving the president. That was kind of interesting. Yeah.
Well, I had one of those cyber events. In the ER, the computers were down. They didn't even know who I was. And couldn't look up any information on me because the computers were down.
Absolutely.
So it's a scary thought.
I found that premise terrifying, actually, because we hear, frequently that we are vulnerable to cyber attack, and not to this extent, perhaps. This takes it to the extreme, but you could certainly see where any kind of meaningful cyber intrusion could be very disruptive.
So not to trivialize it, but it did make me think of everybody remember Y2K.
Yeah.
When you were reading that, it was like, yeah, the world will end.
The world will end. And there's lots of money made by Y2K people that were adjusting the code, if you remember that. Because how many people read the book? And if I could, how many, John, you said you and Margot enjoyed it, how many enjoyed the book?
I've read many of Patterson's books, and I thought this one was more simply written, if that's the right word. It's, sometimes it repeated things, as I got that, let's move on. I did enjoy it though, and as you say, from the aspect of thinking, well, that's President Clinton's input, because Patterson wouldn't think of that, or know about that.
Right.
But I did think it was written more simply than his other.
One of the things, just kind of reading through the reviews myself, was that Patterson, in many people's eyes, is not a good writer.
Right.
I had never heard that before, and I've not read many of his books, so I couldn't really reflect on that.
I enjoy books, so.
Gary?
I was just wondering about the context of the book, because it only took place over 3 days, perhaps it doesn't make any difference, but I mean, I just wonder if he gave any indication, was this a post-Obama era or was this post-Trump era? Didn't he talk about that?
Well,
I'll talk to you afterwards.
I was about to say something, but I'm not gonna go there. It actually, it didn't really identify whether the president was a Republican or a Democrat.
Right.
I certainly put my bias in there and ascribed to him democratic ideals and values, but it wasn't clear. So,
Okay.
but definitely post-Trump if we get that. Sorry.
Thank you.
Anything else? I don't know how long this is supposed to last. Great. Well, thank you very much. Go ahead, Mark.
I was just gonna say, while you were talking, I quickly looked up. You can see the movie when it comes out. Showtime bought the rights,
Oh, is that what?
so it's gonna be on cable, I imagine, first, unless they do a double release in theaters and cable something. So, Showtime bought it.
Very good.
Oh, well, I may as well say that, in New York City, which is where my son lives, he does sound engineering, post-work, actual sound interviews, shows, various things, and so one day he was called and asked to come to do sound for an interview, and that was all he knew. So he went and got things ready, and then asked, well, who are we interviewing today? And they told him President Clinton and James Patterson about their book. And so I
Hey, we got
have a
something
picture, of
famous.
course, on my phone, but it was really exciting. And he said he just, like you said, there's no real politics, Republican or Democrat, but he just was so in awe. I think too, just the power that the man had when he passed, and probably somewhat today too, I'm not sure.
Sure.
Yeah, so that was
Well, that's exciting.
Yeah,
Okay.
Had your son read the book?
Not at the time of the interview, no, but he has since then, yeah, since then.
Anything else? Go ahead.
Did they offer any suggestions in there toward the end of how to change things so this can't happen? Or did you not speculate on that?
It calls for sort of a new deal in regards to cyber terrorism, and of course makes a clarion call that we remove that vulnerability. And I think that's a current statement on affairs, that we still, by all accounts, remain very vulnerable to such an attack on perhaps a smaller scale, but nonetheless highly disruptive. When you talk about our power grids, our major corporations, some of the things that were listed out, if not everything. But I don't know about you, but I found that those passages about what kinds of things this could mean.
That's
Very, very scary. John?
Of all the bad things that could happen, there's some good things that happen too. For example, I could be away from home in the dead of winter and interrogate my home heating system and know what the temperature is in the house, the boiler's working fine, refrigerator's running. All these things are wonderful to have.
Yeah.
So while they can destroy things, enemies could, the benefits of these neat new things are just great.
Yeah. You won't think that way if you come home to your pipes freeze. I get you. Anything else? Well, great. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you so much, Bill, for a really outstanding review today. I think we all had something to think about as well as to comment on. It certainly was, I think it was a book that is worth reading. It has some really good parts, as Bill says. It's light, it can go quickly, but it has some deep thoughts in there that he revealed to us also. So again, many thanks for that. Next week, for our last book sandwiched in, Akiva Silver will review The Hidden Life of Trees by Peter Wolleben. This will be a totally different type of book, and I think it'll be very interesting to hear. Please come back and see us for our last review. And remember to lift your chairs as you return them to the rack today to help us out. Thank you all very much for coming today. And again, thanks to Bill.